of everything.
And I heard you mention, you said about the fact that we don't really know much about what was the arrangement between his party and the Zimbabwean public over land. I'm very, very curious because I want to understand a bit more. And I actually want to express my knowledge about this as well. Would you like to hear me tell you what I know about Zimbabwe, specifically the relationship between Britain to Zimbabwe?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Right away.
I think even if we said no, you'll still continue.
Yeah, do we even have an option? It's like one of those games where you have the option to choose yes or no, but if you choose no, the guy the NPC you're talking to says, "Oh, but I'm still gonna do it." Go ahead.
Well, I was very shocked to read that the Matabeleland massacre, which Robert Mugabe ordered, which involved killing 20,000 people, mostly black people actually, had some participation by Britain. I don't exactly know what the exact involvement was, but I think this was back in the 1980s. Because I'm someone who very much values harmony and peace.
Wait, just a second.
And yeah.
Oh, this guy wants to fight.
Lefty! He wants to fight, but I'm good. All we're missing, Kyle, is
you're about peace. You're about peace and harmony, right?
Yeah, so no, I really value peace and harmony. So when I heard that the British had sold Apache helicopters to Robert Mugabe to use in the Congo back in the 1980s, the 90s I think it was as well.
they fired
to take part in the war there. Yeah, I was quite disturbed. Yeah, because I would like to see safety, and peace in Africa. When I found out that there was 6 feet of files, I'm 6 foot tall. Imagine that, just that many files.
You seem about 14.
I'm actually 6'3". Imagine that many files in Whitehall on Zimbabwean independence, going back before Robert Mugabe came to power.
So let's be clear, are you anti-Mugabe?
This is when Ian Smith.
He's indifferent.
This is when Ian Smith became the Prime Minister of Zimbabwe, and there was the UDI, the Unilateral Declaration of Independence from the United Kingdom, timed on the same day as the American Declaration of Independence. There's 6 feet of files on that whole process in Whitehall, which haven't been declassified. When I heard that, I was so interested. I was so surprised. Because I really, that's another thing I value is transparency,
So do you think
transparency? I would like to find out what happened back then. What happened that made the white farmers in Zimbabwe just unilaterally kick out the United Kingdom and decide they didn't want anything else to do with the Queen anymore?
But no one accepted the declaration. I remember that well. They didn't accept it.
The British government didn't. It's fascinating. Yeah. There's more people joining me now.
You're popular.
I feel my ego just rising up and up and up.
Kyle, climb the post over there. You'll be even more popular. The police will join you.
Killer Communist Days.
There's a song actually from the French Revolution about hanging aristocrats from the lampposts.
Oh shit!
So you mentioned, it was far more sung than the Marseillaise. The song is literally, it's going to be all right. That's what it means, and I think it's Sera. It goes like this. Sera, 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 Sera. Da 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 da. That's how it goes.
That's what you want to do. You want to hang
There's a line that says, "We'll hang the aristocrats from the lampposts." Yeah.
God bless the aristocracy.
I must say, when I heard that, I was very inspired. To look back on the last 200, 300 years of the revolutionary era can be a great source of inspiration. To see that people were willing to literally throw themselves
to
on
hang other people.
Yeah.
They were willing to
kill hundreds of thousands, if not millions.
Millions were murdered
because of ideas.
Are you frightened?
What?
Are you an aristocrat?
No.
Burn the aristocrat!
Hail the aristocracy.
Burn the witch!
Hail the aristocracy.
Content over everything!
Look at that guy.
That's my people's cars. Yes, Mr. Rax up in there as well, What a go on, imagine.
Cole, don't you fall down.
I don't know.
If he falls, he falls.
So, Aren't the things that happened in Zimbabwe likely to happen in South Africa?
I don't know.
You have to
I
lynch
don't
him,
know.
just stand up there.
I remember Mark Curtis, the British analyst and political analyst, described a tremendous land hunger felt by black Zimbabweans in the 80s and 90s. Desire for land, because there was serious land shortage there. And when I heard my sister come back from South Africa recently, describing this feeling of anger among people in South Africa, I was quite concerned. Again, because I want to. It's my home country, South Africa. It's where I'm from originally. And I want to have that safety when I go back there. That feeling of harmony, you know, that people get what they need.
Yeah, good luck with that.
A strategy that meets everybody's needs, not just white farmers, not just black farmers, not just black elites, not just white elites.
How about this? How about the farmers, white farmers keep the land, but we make black people rich in the cities?
So, what you sound like you need a bit of order, like, you know.
I'm just saying that it's very expensive to train black people to farm like modern day Christians, and it's no guarantee that they'll do the same capacity.
I'm gonna get you, bro. You're gonna get rich.
So you want this economy to be safe, protected.
Oh, I want it pure capitalist, like we see in. What are the main African countries that have done very well under capitalism?
Nigeria, South Africa.
But I meant like those really small ones where they how they do.
Well, it depends which ones in terms of the index. You should know you're anti-capitalist. Come on.
Yeah, Kyle, where's Heiko? Haven't seen him in ages.
Where's the master?
Where's the master?
The protege is here with master. Listen, you never get a communist to get up early in the morning. No commies up early.
This gentleman mentions Nigeria as an example of a successful capitalist.
No, that was not one example I was saying. But go on.
I was quite intrigued. No, I was quite intrigued mentioning that. He mentioned that. Quite shocked actually that you mentioned Nigeria, especially when I consider what happened to Ken Saro-Wiwa and all the people of Ngoniland who had to resist against Shell Oil's destruction of the Niger Delta in the pursuit of oil there. When I remember in the 1960s, the Civil War. I say I remember as if I was there. I wasn't there. I'm only 23. But the Nigerian Civil War in 1963, I think it was, which killed more than 1 million people, mostly in the east of the country where there was also oil as well, and that Britain took part in it. I'm quite shocked to hear that. This gentleman says Nigeria is an example of a successful capitalist African country. Because I'd like to understand, what is your measure of success? What is your measure of success?
God, Queen and country.
Sorry?
Success.
God, Queen and country.
Well, first of all, you need a nation that's stable.
So stability, okay. All right.
Fair
now,
enough.
is a country like Nigeria, where under Olusegun Obasanjo in the early 2000s, about 10,000 people were killed by the government. By the way, makes Robert Mugabe look like a small fry.
But it's a socialist.
What the Nigerian dictators have done over the years makes Zimbabwe look like a...
But the best measurement of a stable country is full employment. Right? So the
Yeah, but
goal
look,
of all
guys,
capitalist and socialist countries
I just
Do you
don't
really
think
value that
Nigeria is a good
contribution?
example,
People making this
honestly.
contribution?
full employment.
Guys, look, listen. I'll have to disagree with you here. I don't think Nigeria is a good example with Boko Haram running amok in the country, like killing people by the thousands. I think it's a good example at all, honestly. I mean, is Syria a good example of a stable country? I don't think so. Is Ukraine a good example of a stable country?
I'm saying, well, this is the thing. There's the religious aspect, especially with Nigeria, where half of it's Christian and the other half is Muslim. So that's fucked in its own way.
Yeah, but who's allowing them to prosper there? What's the system that's allowing Boko Haram to keep their grip on the people, to indoctrinate the Muslim population into becoming,
Islam, funded by the Middle
No,
East.
no. Look,
The Boko Haram is
the
funded
political. Who rules Nigeria? Who's the leader of Nigeria?
Well, the president, he can't control Boko Haram because they're funded by the Gulf states.
Yeah, okay, fair
they're
enough.
just giving
But
them money
can
and
the
arms.
president not fight the Boko Haram
Hello?
in any conceivable way?
Boko
Can
Haram
he
are
not
militant.
fight against them? Like Boko Haram aren't like the eastern Ukrainian regions. They're not getting weapons and troops and training all the time from Russia.
Just honest.
yeah, okay, it's just money, but you can kind of fight against it. It's
you
difficult.
can't.
Look, it's difficult to. The logistics itself is a nightmare. If
God
the Gulf
bless my
states are
Nigerian
founding.
Christian sisters and brothers.
Okay, bro, wait, Rob, wait. I'll have to disagree with you here because, look, the Nigerians. You're saying that the Nigerians are getting their funding from the Gulf states, right? Okay,
Boko Haram.
Boko Haram. Yeah, okay, yeah. The Nigerians from Boko Haram.
You look
ones.
bored, man, in the sunglasses.
Either way, if they are getting their funding from the Gulf states, it means the logistics are not very easy because there's a big space between the Gulf states and Nigeria.
I would probably rarely agree, but the arms trade is selling Boko Haram arms, which they should be doing, by money from the Gulf states. So the Gulf states are coming in and they're buying.
But who's allowing them to sell that?
Well, it's very difficult to control Nigeria. It's a large country.
And you also
It's got
got
very porous boundaries, right?
And you also got to take in consideration that in the south of Nigeria, it's a climate that's kind of like Mediterranean-ish, whilst in the north it's like almost like desert. So
very
even
porous
if the religion wasn't a problem, the people living in those different environments are going to collide or have conflicts because living in different environments, you're not. This is why
different culture,
This is why
yes.
Africa is so like split up in different countries because the
different
climates
climates,
are
yes,
so
different
like,
climates.
radically different. So if you want a stable country, you need a country.
It's true, there's a lot of climate
you say this is
diversity
why
in
Africa
Africa.
split up in different countries.
Partly, not I know.
Okay. I'm a bit wary here. Listen to this, because I like some clarity and consistency with history here.
It's so inconsistent.
Well, do you want to? I mean, you want to hear about why Africa looks the way it does in terms of the maps. Same with the Middle East.
Or India and Pakistan.
Let's go.
I just want us to be aware that it was literally drawn up by men with pencils on a piece of paper. Literally, like it was drawn up quite arbitrarily, and according to some historians, it was done with a specific intent in mind to divide up certain tribes from each other.
Because as in Nigeria, you've got 4 or 5 ethnic groups, core ethnic groups in Nigeria.
That's just getting started. Those are the 5 main ones.
Top 5 main ones, yeah.
Yeah.
So Nigeria should be
Kyle,
500.
it wasn't drawn
if it
by
wasn't
pencils.
Africa.
All borders are drawn by blood. If you have the power
the
to
Eu-
draw
the
the
Eu-
border,
the
you are
Europeans
going
who-
to draw the border.
The Europeans didn't do it out of, I don't care, let's just do this, that. No, they were under pressure saying, okay, these people want to be their own
I'm
place.
seeing these
people
lovely
want to be
ladies
their
sitting
own
at the
place.
back here.
I'm cheating.
I'm a bit wary. I want to have some participation. Do you guys want to ask a question or give your opinion? Or
What are you talking about?
we're talking about Nigeria. Talking about
We were talking
Robert
about
Mugabe.
Zimbabwe.
Talking about South Africa. Talking about the British relationship to all these places. Yeah.
And what the ruined Mugabe left Rhodesia.
Are you quite shocked at what's happened? Yeah.
How did he last that long?
Sorry?
How did he last that long?
Mugabe.
Partly it was with British help, actually. Before he started to be disobedient and not pay attention to what the IMF wanted, he was actually quite a favourite of the UK. And I gave the example of where the British government gave licenses to arms dealers to sell Robert Mugabe's government, I think it was Apache helicopters to use against the Congo. You could find out for yourself if this is true. You can look into it yourself. And yeah, I mean,
But you're too young. I lived through it. You were born later.
so you're quite annoyed when I'm talking about.
No, I'm not annoyed. I'm just
So does the veracity of his argument depend on his age?
Not necessarily. But
Well, exactly. It's not a very good
really
argument to
didn't
say you're too
history.
young to know something.
So what would you? So would you like some more
I
clarity
can
then? or-
remember Ian Smith turning up in a ship to discuss politics. Then he was not. But you're too young for that.
How old do you have to be to discuss politics?
Depends how old the politics is.
Okay, how can we discuss the politics in ancient Rome?
They made a good job with the water system.
They did with the aqueducts. But you see what I mean? If like no person is old enough to have to have been living through, old politics, very very old political systems. So the argument of youth that you're too young to argue about something, it doesn't really hold up. For example, in the Soviet Union, there's many people who lived through the Soviet Union and who defend it. Does that mean they know more about people nowadays? No, exactly the opposite. They know less about the Soviet Union because in their times there was a very developed indoctrination system in the Soviet Union that was forcing them to believe in the things that they believe in. So in that case, it's the opposite. The opposite is actually what functions.
Putin is probably standing home stirring up some poison at this moment.
Sorry?
Putin is only up to poison.
He is indeed. He is. Oh, don't slap him. He's telling the truth. He's telling the truth, lady. Ma'am, he's.
The point is, you don't have to live through the times that it's called, like made history. You would read about history.
Yes.
And try not to live that same history again.
Yes, you learn that history and try to not commit the same mistakes. Exactly.
Same mistakes.
Exactly. That's a very good point.
And if you're intelligent enough, you sound very intelligent. You've been
thank
to
you.
uni and what have you. So this is your point. You've got freedom of speech to use it. It's whether you live through it or not. It doesn't make any difference whatsoever.
Fair enough. That's a good point. Go ahead, Carl. Sorry.
So you guys were both quite indignant when you were saying you're too young to comment about history and I'm too young.
Yeah.
You just wanted that appreciation. Hey,
I'd
Oh, look
if
who's
he was
back.
Even
Yeah.
younger. If he was younger.
you want more participation in discussions of politics. Yeah. I must say, when people say that I'm too young to talk about Margaret Thatcher or I'm too young to talk about Robert Mugabe, for example, I'm just a bit disappointed,
Yeah.
because I kind of value that equality, like when you're talking to someone,
Yeah.
sense of like, yeah, we may be different in terms of our beliefs and our age, background, and all the rest, but we're both of us trying to understand the world, what's happened. We want to understand, what is my role in this existence right now, on this planet, at this exact point in time, 11:30 Sunday, Speaker's Corner, And yeah, it's true. It's rather. I suspect people when they say that they're a bit insecure. I think when he heard that, he was a bit insecure. Like he wanted to understand more himself. Maybe he valued that equality, but do you see what I mean? Felt like he didn't know enough about it himself. I mean, I think we live in a very competitive society where, if you're sort of a middle-aged guy and you're chatting to a young guy about politics, and he knows something you don't about Mugabe, for example, then you might feel quite insecure. You're like, I should know about that. I'm so much older than he was. I lived through that time. I should know better. It's all these thoughts that come into our head.
He said he saw Ian Smith come off the boat.
Sorry?
He said he saw Ian Smith come off a boat.
He saw Ian Smith come off a boat, yeah. I would have liked to see that. I would have liked to see Ian Smith. I'm quite disappointed I was never there to see that. Well, what else should we talk about? You've been very quiet, madam. You've been listening for a while, yeah. Is there anything you're interested to find out about or discuss, or is there anything you're worried about, you want to raise? Climate, okay. Yeah. So, are you talking about the reports from the United Nations that you've read?
You're asking about climate, Mr. Extinction Rebellion here.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So I remember being on the bridge. Was it Lambeth Bridge? In October of last year. I think it was October, and helping to block the road for Extinction Rebellion.
That's fine.
So I got no coins.
Okay, guys, I'll be right back. There's some funny stuff going
Can you
on.
leave my books here? Hey, Pavlov, did you leave my books?
Yeah, sure.
Just leave them on the ground if you want.
Oh, you don't trust me, Kyle. You don't trust me. He says he's been circumcised twice. I gotta know how that's done.
I'm jealous. I've only been circumcised once. So, yeah, no, I have to say when I'm worried when I look at that report. It's about safety, isn't it? I imagine the food prices going up, and then, civil unrest, and the army being called into London to try and put things. I imagine the Thames flooding over. I imagine all these things. I'm very, very worried. I want to live in a stable city where things are functional and, yeah. So, you're a speaker?
I will be later on, yeah.
Okay, what are you speaking about?
A party called the British National Party.
Are you a BNP?
Yeah, I've been a member for many years, but having a look around, it's my first time in Speaker's Corner. I've been meaning to come up here for many years, and this is the first time I've managed to get around to it. So I'll probably start about 1:15 because I just want to take in the atmosphere before I get started. Well, what are you talking about today?
Well, I've just been speaking about climate change just now. And
Oh, right, okay,
I was just chatting to this lady. You mentioned you were worried about climate change. Yeah. Was it less than 12 years left to fix. This is what the. Do you want to tell me what the statistic was? Do you remember?
I didn't. I haven't read the report, but I think the timeline that they came up with was 12 years to prevent irreversible climate change.
12 years to prevent irreversible
climate change. 2 degrees.
By rising 2
I
degrees.
think that was the statistic, which is the number that was talked about. And possibly in the video, which can start doing damage, which changes life.
You also sound quite engaged, both of you, though. Like you're you're interested in this. Yeah. Because you want to understand what to do about it. Do you have some kind of purpose? Do something about it. Yeah.
Can I ask you, because this is a subject no one's talked about with climate change, approximately 3 years ago, we celebrated the fact that we had 7 billion people on this earth. And it's so important to do something about climate change. We recycle, for example. We use public transport more. But do you not think that if we all started talking to each other and saying, you know what, maybe if the world had fewer children, that would be a greater help. In other words, maybe say to people, having 2 children is responsible.
Oh no, you didn't.
The richest people in the world consume most of the world's resources.
Who has to have less children?
Westerners.
Everyone.
Who?
Everyone.
Did I hear that correctly?
Everyone. The world.
The Westerners need to have less children. Did I hear that correctly?
Absolutely. We need to take responsibility.
You do know that the Westerners are the ones whose population is decreasing, don't you?
We are decreasing in population. There's a lot of statistics that suggest that global population.
So why is it the Westerners?
About 11 billion. Because a lot of people speculate that people in the developing world who are having more children are responsible for a lot of the consumption. But the reality is that the richest in the world consume far more than the poorest in the world. And we have to look to ourselves for those solutions because we are responsible for what we do.
Okay, so wait, lady, are we talking about... Sorry, are we talking about overpopulation or are we talking about pollution?
Overconsumption.
Overconsumption. Okay, that's a different matter altogether.
Well, I think that it's the reverse of the overpopulation argument.
No.
I think the argument that we're overpopulated and that we should seek to reduce our rate of population increase
in the West
in order to reduce consumption. No, I think the global argument that we should seek to reduce population growth.
Yeah, but you did say that the Westerners should basically stop reproducing.
No, that's not what
No, she didn't say that.
She
said fewer children.
I said if we're going
to
talk about overpopulation, the overpopulation that we need to talk about is the population of those who are doing the most damage to the world.
Yeah, I agree.
Ultimately, it's not really a population conversation, it's a consumption conversation. We need to consume less. We need to start talking about leaving fossil fuels in the ground. We need to start talking about green energy. We need to start talking about sustainable fashion, sustainable food choices, sustainable transport choices. And I think that part of my concern about climate change is that this dialogue just seeks to pit one group of people against another.
Oh, so you want more cooperation between the different groups?
And those people who are overpopulated, India is predicted to basically take the hit from about, I think the statistics are around about 50% of all.
You seem very worried. You seem very anxious talking about this.
I am.
Indeed.
I am.
Well, I'm glad you brought the subject of India up because I work with a fantastic Indian lady and she was fortunate, she was wealthy, and she said that in India the population increases by the total size of Australia every year. And what she was saying is the wealthy Indians, generally they have fewer children, but unfortunately the poor Indians who are very poor, they tend to have over 10 children because they need someone to survive to look after them in their old age.
Also,
and if we're going to make a difference, then
poor.
those poor people need to be helped. And in that respect, there won't be the need for them to have more than 10 children because unfortunately it's creating mass poverty. And together we can all make a difference, but we need to talk about world overpopulation. 7 billion is unsustainable. It is absolute madness.
Plus, there's you want more stability then in the population, keeping it...
Well, I think 7 billion is too many, but the only way we can stop that from rising is actually to encourage people to have fewer children. And I'm not talking about in the UK, I'm talking about through the whole of the planet.
I remember reading Murray Bookchin talking about women and why they have more children in poorer countries, and he said it's to do with education. When they get educated, and they're a bit more aware of their things like human rights and so on, a bit more aware of their freedom, then they don't have to be baby factories. Basically, they can be like they can have a choice. I can have a kid if I want to. If I don't want to, I don't have to.
Yeah,
It's
that's
not like I
part
have
of
to
the reason.
be. Yeah. So I would like to see more. Yeah, just discussion of that. You know,
Okay.
how to create a level of equality, and I think it's exactly what you said. It's about support. A lot of these women are having more children, and men as well having kids with them. It's their insurance policy, or it's their pension.
It is.
Yeah, they're having kids. It's because when they get old, they need someone to look after them.
And they know a lot of
Yeah.
their children are
Yeah.
going to die because of
Yeah.
the poverty. But if they can just get 2 or 3 to survive to take care of them when they're old and they can't go to work, that's where the problem in India lies.
When I hear people say, "Oh, we've got to stop having so many kids," and you know, it's all those black people in Africa and Indian people having too many children. That's why their planet's, you know, on fire and not enough resources. I get really irritable because
It's not about black and white. It's
Understanding,
about
you know?
too many human beings. I get frustrated.
I don't think that's a listen, guys.
Because Western population is decreasing. And
Can I just say, why not both? Why cannot both be an issue?
No,
can we
why not
I buy-
none
I
of
buy
them?
into pe- I
Why
buy
not
into
none of
child
them? Listen,
theory,
guys.
which says
The
we're
problem
gonna
is
top
not
11
the problem is not
billion
with the problem is not with the excessive natality. The problem is with poverty. That's why people have children in poorer countries. Because again, as you said, exactly as you said, they need somebody to help them survive because there's no means for
You
them to
mentioned
survive.
poverty, Pavlov. Can I
Wait,
also
wait,
talk
wait,
about
wait.
inequality as well? Okay, go on. So sorry, finish what you were going to say.
No, ask away.
Well, I was going to say inequality because in more unequal rich countries, there's more consumption. According to Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett of the Equality Trust, he's a social epidemiologist. They studied the relationship between social factors and disease, and they find out that actually in more unequal rich countries, such as Britain or Singapore or Japan, if there's a higher level of a gap between the rich and the poor, there's more consumption of
no kidding.
resources, and there's less recycling as well. And they link it to status.
No. That's
They
not
link it.
true.
Hold on a second. They link it to insecurity over status. If you're in a country with high levels of inequality, you might feel quite insecure because you want to be respected. You know, you're seeing all these people with Maseratis and Ferraris, and you may only have like a Ford or something. You know, so you kind of. The idea is that you may be more likely to splash out more money on jewelry, because we're human beings. We want to be respected. We want to have status. We want to be loved and so on. And that inequality is very destabilizing. It makes people want to spend more money.
Don't go that way. You're ruining your argument with emotionality. Listen, the problem is not excessive consumption. What pollutes the environment the most is not consumption, it's production. And the countries that produce are not the rich countries that consume. They are usually even the poorer countries that don't really care that much about their people, that make their people work like slaves, like China, for example, or India, and they produce a lot. And the US is amongst those because US has a lot of industry, a lot of waste into the environment. The countries, look at Europe, for example. Is there really a lot of production in Europe? Not really, no. There's not a lot of production, not a lot of prime materials in Europe to create the stuff. What Europeans do is they specialize in trade, all those things. They change the prime materials that are created somewhere else in the world. And the places where those materials are created are the ones that pollute the environment the most. Now the consumption itself, it's not really polluting it that much.
You look very skeptical.
Do you have something to say about that? No? Fair enough.
If you have no consumption, you have no production. So I think the consumption is a problem.
Yes, but it won't function that way. If people have the ability to consume, they will consume because they have the means to achieve that consumption. It needs to be something agreed amongst different countries. We can't just blame the people for buying things because those things are available. It's simply a natural reaction. Like people will buy things because they need things, because they have the means to do that.
Somewhere over there,
Sorry?
making them so.
Sorry?
They're available because somebody is sat here making them available.
They're available
We've been
because
going
somebody
to other
produces them.
countries. We've been going to other countries.
Lady, the economies of those countries, of those poorer countries, depend on producing these things that pollute the environment. It's not that easy. It's not that easy of an answer.
No,
If
but
you
you're saying
remove
it's
that
a simple solution, but you can't resolve people in this country.
If you remove consumption, if you decrease consumption, the countries that will suffer the most are not the countries in the West. They are the poorer countries.
So it's a long
They are the ones that will suffer the
long-term
most.
economic solution, which
No,
involves
it's
us
not a
working
solution
together.
because it will ruin the lives of both the sides. It's not like one side is the good guys, another is the bad guys. The world functions in a functional way. It is the way it is because it functions somehow. The way to improve
I
it.
don't describe the way we function as functional. I describe our function as dysfunctional.
Wait. Yeah, that's the problem. You think functionality is dysfunctional, but the world is the way it is because of certain reasons.
If you have a system that's based, and this is not an answer, it's just if you have a system that is based on exploitation of natural resources, of cheap labour, of poor labour standards, of lack of environmental regulation abroad, I don't think it's wrong to take responsibility for being at the end of that system and being part of what drives that system.
Yeah,
I'm not
okay.
saying that as a standalone, like that is all that needs to be done, but I don't think that you can say that consumption is not a problem.
Very good
And
point, very good point.
when
But how
people
do you
are so
change
mired
that?
and
Hold on a
deep in
second.
poverty-
Okay,
I really
wait.
appreciate you talking about this, lady, because you mentioned this like awareness of what goes into every product. That you mentioned cheap labor, exploitation of the natural environment, poor labor, and I sometimes look at a sandwich or I look at like this is my iPhone 4, and I just think like I wonder what
is that brick?
Yeah, it's a Tamagotchi. Yeah, I wonder what went into it. I'm like thinking how it got here to where I am now. And I just feel so disappointed that I don't know.
Disappointed in what?
Because I
What
just
are
want to
you
be aware. Like
disappointed?
when I heard that, for example, the coltan, the metal that's in most iPhones, is mined by basically like slaves, slaves in the Congo. I was horrified. I was absolutely shocked. I mean, I know the world we live in is not perfect. I'm not saying it's.
We're always going to make a mark, like somewhere along the line.
It's just,
Alright,
I wish
so-
there's that deep alienation I think I sense of people when they take out a product, or they even like your earrings, for example. It could be even something so small, or sunglasses, and they're just looking at it like what. They sort of have that alienation from it. They like wonder where it came from. I mean, I didn't make it, and then that's why we treasure the things that come down to us from our family. So I've got like a pocket watch from my great grandfather, and I've got a silver plate from my grandfather as well. And I've got these things really matter then, because you start to have a really strong connection with them. You know exactly where they came from, who had them. As human beings, we really value having that meaning and connection, I think, across time.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Don't you think that those silver plates that you have from 100 years ago were extracted from a poor country?
Probably. It's from
And extracting there from a poor country, you pollute that country also. This is a circular situation.
You're also talking like this lady about awareness. How we want to be more aware of where this
No, because
to understand
I
it.
was hearing you. Poor country. I come from a poor country. I am here a tourist. My country is a copper producer, and in some way we need to produce copper in order to maintain our population. So what is your solution about that?
Exactly. That's what I was talking about.
Yeah,
the
you wanna-
economy
you
of
wanna
poorer
have
countries
stability.
depends on those industries.
At the moment,
At
Well,
the
just
moment,
point out
how
that-
are you
that
planning to
mining
fix
copper-
it?
I don't have the answer.
Well, if you
We're
don't
having a
have the
discussion.
answer,
But
don't,
that's the point of discussion.
Sorry, when
isn't
you two are talking, I'm just getting a bit frustrated. 'cause
No,
I just want to have
wait,
a bit
Kyle,
more
Kyle.
participation from other people. Anybody
Fair
else
enough.
spoken? Would you like to
Yes, Kyle, I'd like
say
to answer
something?
the lady.
Anybody else?
Okay,
You'd
if
like
you.
to-
I think it's also
Okay,
up
good,
to,
good, Kyle, good. You're the judge now. You're the
I
judge.
think it's also up to the individuals to drive the change through the demand. So we all have a choice, and if we start investigating our own products and making our own decisions about if the environment is being hurt or not, if this is a fair product or not, and we start individually demanding the right thing, aggregately, that's going to have a change. And
What
those
is the right thing?
responsible sourcing, right conditions for human beings, the wages, the conditions. There's many ways, right, to look at it.
Okay.
And if we don't have alternatives right now, then that's a difficult choice. But in vehicles, you have fossil fuels, you have electric vehicles. You have a choice there, So I think if people focus on their own decisions, aggregately you can drive quite a big change. You know.
You sound very optimistic.
Yeah, I think you can. It just takes time. And those poor countries will adapt to that demand. They'll still be more efficient at producing the environmentally friendly alternatives. They will, because labor's cheaper, and you know they can just shift their industries. But it takes time, and it's talk is cheap. You know, you have to take action. You have to investigate for yourself. You have to find a way to reduce plastic consumption, and it's easy for us, and it's hard. It's hard for everyone, right? In the end, because convenience is attractive. You know,
it's easy for us to say that, but let me get this straight. You guys want to influence the Western governments to improve the life condition and to reduce the production in the poorer countries, which depend on that same.
But that's going through the government, right?
Yes.
Forget the government.
How can you forget the government? The government is the one who calls the shots.
No,
if you don't have any power on the government, you don't have no power.
But what are you trying to achieve? So what are you trying to achieve? Yeah.
I'm trying to give a sense of understanding to this conversation, because it's very easy to say, oh, we should just make it so people have a better life. We should just be friendlier to each other. We should just pay more to the lower paid people. You know, we should help the poorer countries. We should make them produce less and pollute the environment less. It's not that simple. It is the way it is because of certain reasons that I feel like are being very much misunderstood. And one of those reasons is it's in the interest of those poorer countries to produce the way they are producing. Because imagine this, if they start, and I'm not saying it's good or bad.
Driven by our demand.
Sorry?
Driven by our demand.
Our demand.
I'm really glad you mentioned this.
So wait,
the economy is based on demand.
Of course it is.
In my opinion, the economy.
Kyle,
if it isn't already,
but they need to sell. They need to sell something. So they're selling so much. They get stuff in their economy.
Word consumerism,
they get Kyle. Listen to this.
Whenever I hear this word consumerism, I get very concerned. I just want some clarity here. I read that in the 1920s there was a problem of overproduction in the United States. If you read a book called The Zeitgeist Movement Defined, it talks about this. There's a problem of overproduction. The production was so powerful in the United States at that time, far outstripped what was happening in Britain. In both Germany and the US, it was like chemicals, engineering, telecommunications, all government driven, might I point out, mainly driven by army and military expenditure. When that was taking off, there was a huge wave of panic among the capitalist class. Because they wanted to sell their stuff. And if they have so much stuff, they can't sell it all, right? There's only so many jackets we want, and cars we want. And so according to this book, Zeitgeist Movement Defined, they sat down and they created to try and move that product off onto the public. They created what they call a culture of consumption, rituals of consumption people engage in, and it was the birth of the advertising industry. Before that, advertising was mainly concerned with the product. This table is this big, it can fit this many people, it's this shape, and it's this quality wood and all the rest. After that point, it became about lifestyle. Did you just say lifestyle? Yeah, this lady's completely right. It became about, if you buy this table, you'll be like Madonna, or whoever the hell it is, it doesn't matter. You'll be like this person, you'll be part of that special club of people who buy things at IKEA or at Marks and Spencer's or whatever.
Sorry to interrupt you, but the beauty of the marketing cycle is that it doesn't quite work. If you get it, then you're a little bit disappointed and enough to go for it again. And if it worked, if the marketing message was, you buy this coat and you'll be happy, full stop, that's the end of consumption. Understand? You buy the coat, you're happy, you never want to buy another coat. Because it's disappointing over and over again, consumption, that keeps you going. And that's why marketing is a business.
So when I hear about this marketing stuff about trying to get people to buy as many clothes as possible, or use up as many copper wires as possible, or glasses or whatever, I'm very worried. I'd like to have a stable planet where we're not throwing things away and where we keep things as much as possible, pass them down through the generations,
Kyle, it's funny because
and repair things. When they break down, I had an old lady at the church I work at. She actually gave me a.
Right.
I'm not Christian or anything, but I work at a church, and she was so kind. She actually sewed up a jacket I had. I was about to throw it away. I was about to literally throw it. I was going to give it to Oxfam or something. She sewed it up and fixed it.
You're proposing because
Thank you.
In my view, you already developed. In my country, we need money, we need incomes
to
Yeah.
give
So you want stability and support for the people of your country. So that's why they mine for copper. You know. And this lady talks about how, you know, you were mentioning all the consumption that goes on. You like Westerners to consume less because you want stability. Some people want to have the consumption stay at the same level because they think this is a functional system and they'd like to keep that stability going. All of this is about stability. This gentleman here was talking about investing in new technologies. These are all strategies. I think the first thing we need to do is separate the human need, the universal human need, from the particular strategy. Just to be aware, we're all trying to achieve that stability and support for our populations so that they're nurtured and they're looked after, you know, we can have children and create life and so on. The way we do that may differ. Some of us might prefer to emphasize investing in electric cars. Some of us want to cut down on buying things like electric cars entirely. Some of us think things are pretty good and they need to be protected as the way they are.
Never said that.
I never said you did, but you might.
Yeah, you're pointing at me. Pretty sure you said that.
You mentioned just your country. You said a poor country wanting copper. These are all strategies, and I would like to have discussion of what a strategy would look like that would meet all of our needs, not just
That's not
one
possible,
group,
Kyle.
one group specific needs for stability, like one poor country or one particular market or one. Do you see what I mean? That cooperation, I think, is absolutely essential to social change.
Said by a socialist.
Yeah, no, I'm a socialist.
Listen, Kyle.
I
I wanted
believe
to give you exactly the same example that you gave me. And it's funny because I feel like you're cutting the branch you're sitting on by giving. Wait,
socialism is a strategy.
Kyle, I'll let you speak. Let me speak. You gave me the example of the U.S. after they were helping Europe after World War II, helping them rebuild and all that stuff. Is that correct? And the great collapse of the American economy. Is that not what you were talking about?
No, I wasn't speaking about that so much.
I mean, you did mention it, didn't you?
Well, no,
Or
I didn't
misunderstand?
mention the Great Depression or the Marshall Plan. I didn't mention
So
those.
what were you mentioning when you said about the U.S. helping Europe and when the demand
Didn't mention
lowered,
anything about
the
Europe.
economy collapsed?
We talk about the Marshall Plan. It's quite interesting. Why did the United
wait,
States
what were you
help
speaking about?
Britain and France and all those countries after World War II? That was well after. Are you referring to what happened after
I'm
World War II?
referring to that. Yeah, I'm referring
Yeah.
to the Americans
Let's just be
helping
clear.
the
It wasn't out of
Europeans
the.
rebuild.
I don't think it was out of the kindness of their hearts.
No, Kyle, listen. Did
US
you mention it or
planners
did you
are
not?
hard-headed,
Kyle,
hard-nosed people.
Kyle.
They don't just
Nobody
dole
said
out
it's
money
from
to countries like
kindness.
Italy
Nobody
and France
said
and
it's out
Britain
of kindness.
just because of kindness.
Kyle, calm down. Nobody
It was their particular desire for stability as well. So they saw the Soviet Union and they were frightened.
Kyle, nobody
they saw
said
the Soviet
it was
Union.
out of kindness.
They saw the power of the communist parties in places like
Kyle.
China and in France and in Italy, and they were very concerned
Kyle.
because they wanted that stability as they saw it, as they wanted, a specific way.
Wait, Kyle, calm
And
down.
so they invested in Britain and they invested in France and Italy.
Yes,
and
they
they did that because of that, I think, desire for a certain kind of order, global order that they wanted.
Yes, of course. Nobody's arguing against that. But did you mention it or did you not mention that? You mentioned it, didn't you?
I didn't mention
a
it
while
just-
ago.
I only mentioned it
Whether
just
he
now.
did or he didn't,
You mentioned
what's
it.
your point?
It's very
Sorry?
important. It's very important
Would you like
because
me to come down?
because that exact
Okay.
point goes against his whole argument. As he said, when the the demand in Europe lowered and the offer in America, the production was still high, the economy collapsed. And from that, I can tell you guys that that's exactly what's going to happen if you lower the demand in the West. The economies of the poorer countries that produce will collapse.
So this is
and that,
why, yeah,
and that's
yeah.
exactly what will happen, because the one who produces is the one who's going to suffer. Do you understand that?
So this
That's
lady-
why.
yeah,
That's why what
yeah.
I'm saying is,
It's not
What
just
you-
the producer, the consumption, also the
if you lower the consumption, the
It's a
person who
whole-
produces will have to lower the.
So
you know,
this
the
lady, when
producer.
this lady said we got to lower consumption,
we're
I
in
was
a
actually very
globalized
concerned.
economy.
No,
It's not a simple
'cause-
solution.
Hold on, guys.
No,
hold
no,
on.
I agree, I
Hold on,
agree.
hold on. Because yes, I need that clarity as well about the system we live in. If you like, all of our jobs depend on consumption. I'm talking about the people who are employed here. Like, all of our jobs depend on consumption, of course. If you stop buying handbags and T-shirts and holidays, then those jobs are going to start to disappear. The jobs for making handbags and making T-shirts. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't buy these things or you should buy them. I'm not saying you should buy them to keep the economy going and be a good citizen. It's not what I'm saying at all. I'm not here to tell you what you should and shouldn't do. I'm just trying to ask for some clarity here, so we're aware of the system. That this system depends. You're talking about economic collapse, and you're talking about cutting down on consumption. And then the flip side, this is the interesting thing here as well.
I didn't say put down
You
on
didn't.
consumption. I said take responsibility for our consumption.
Just be aware of it.
And there are better ways to consume. And I do think consuming less is part of that, if I'm honest.
Sure. You did say we have to consume less, didn't you?
I said we have to take responsibility for what we consume.
But you also said we have to consume less.
So you could
No, this lady's talking about
consuming
awareness.
less is part of taking responsibility, but that doesn't mean reducing consumption.
Consuming less has its own consequences, and we have to think about the things we do, because even a benevolent desire might result in something very bad happening. That's what I'm talking about. Anyway, Carl.
No, it's on the flip side. It's quite interesting. If Jeremy Corbyn gets into power, very likely there'll be a level of redistribution of wealth in Britain, and so that poorer people in Britain will start to get more money, and they'll have a better lifestyle. That's kind of projected with social democracy. If you look what happened after World War II, when Social Democrats came into power, that's what they did. That's what Jeremy Corbyn wants to do. Now, I'm actually quite worried about this. On the one hand, I love equality, and I'd like to have more a closed gap between the rich and the poor, more working together, more stable society.
Forced.
On the other hand, there's that stability with the environment. If more people have more money in their pockets because of more equality, they're going to spend. If the current level of social conditioning continues to happen and we keep buying things, consumption might actually go up dramatically, and then we might have a even bigger trash heap in places like the Atlantic and Pacific and so on.
You have two big things there. You have one is the economy, that's a big part, and then you have the environment, right? Those are two massive, very, very big things on their own. It's difficult to solve everything in one go, you know? So, you gotta give it more thought individually as well, because I think you'll struggle to come up with a solution that fits everything in one go. That distribution plan, it's messing with markets and so on, but in theory, consumption should be a positive thing for the economy. It should. Your consumption is my income. My income is my spending, and it's your.
There's this interdependence in the economy.
There's absolutely, but there's cycles too. When we introduce debt makes the cycle really volatile. It makes it go up and down, and when we bust, we end up a little bit higher than where we were before. So all in all, I think it's positive. Like debt used responsibly, it's a good thing. If a farmer buys more tractors and he's producing more tomatoes, that's productivity. Where the UK is like the standards rising, But if we lend that money and with that we go buy a plasma television 50-inch screen, like that's a waste. That's going to put debt. That's going to put burden on us to repay that debt, right? The farmer is producing more, he's making more income, he can pay off the debt, and so debt used correctly, it's a positive thing. So it allows people that don't have money to make those moves, invest correctly, and maybe it work positively. The problem is we tend to use it irresponsibly.
You still seem very doubtful about this.
I keep coming back to in my mind that there's some studies that say that the potential cost of not addressing climate change is around about double the global GDP at the moment. We can't afford to address this problem. We really can't afford not to address this problem.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
And I do understand that means that
you're
there are
probably
some difficult
right.
decisions and some compromises to be made.
No, you're probably right.
Hold on.
No, I don't really have anything to say. I can't really disagree that a lot of the solutions are problematic. But I think it's a beautiful statement to say that a benevolent act can have massive unintended consequences, and there are examples of that throughout history. There are examples of that happening today. Absolutely, a lot of charities kind of demonstrate that in motion through some of their work, and I think. But it just really disturbs me that we would try and protect the current system because it is by definition not sustainable. And sooner or later it's going to fall apart.
And you seem very afraid about this.
Climate change, forget it.
Not for myself, I think I'll be alright.
It's about your family and your
No, it's about
society.
It's about people in the Solomon Islands that are having to buy private land and relocate. And
so what kind of system is
people that I work with that I work to show my colours, I work on a cruise ship, and most of the people that I work with are Indian and Filipino, and the Philippines is a collection of 7,000 islands, but not for that long. The people that I work with in India are constantly having to suffer bereavements and like the destruction of entire communities back home because of the increased increased burden of monsoons every year, because of the increased burden of like adverse weather conditions. Like it's absolutely terrifying, and we should all be very worried about it. And actually, England isn't forecast to suffer the worst of these effects. But where are we going to mine our copper when our copper mines are flooded? And whose income are we protecting when these people are not there anymore?
Okay, but how can we change the choices done by the Indian government? Only by forcing the Indian government to do something. Is that what you are advocating for?
No.
The law and the infrastructure put forward by the Indian government is a minimum. So I worked for a company several years ago who went to Indonesia and Thailand and actually paid to drastically improve labour conditions in the factories they own, introduced solar lighting, air conditioning, which they didn't previously have because the working standards were horrible. I'm not saying it's perfect, I'm not saying every company, it has an impact on the price and the end product that's passed on to the consumer. It's, I guess, an example of what we all should be doing. Now, the governments of those countries don't say you must do this if you want to trade here. They could, they absolutely could if they wish to. But just because the law sets a bare minimum standard doesn't mean that we're disobeying the law by going over and delivering more to those people.
No, but listen, my question is, how will you change the situation? How do you plan on changing it?
Just giving an example of how capitalism
It's difficult. It's a really
difficult. How capitalism? The Indians are also capitalists. The West is not the only capitalist system. Most systems are capitalist.
I don't think it's a political solution at all. It's not a political
well, that's
solution.
What I'm saying.
It's not an economical solution either. It's awakening of the world. People have to wake up and say, I have to be different. I have to change the world for myself.
But how will you be different? What
by making choices, your own little changes.
For example,
using less water. For example,
it won't change anything.
It will. At a very small level, it will. Of course, it will.
Really won't.
It'll change.
You know where London is located, don't you? It's at the delta of the river. Whether we consume more water or not, at least from the tap, won't matter.
Okay,
it will go to the ocean.
Forget the water in London. Plastic bags.
That's a problem.
Packaging, fossil fuels.
Dealing with the garbage is the biggest problem.
Fossil
I think
fuels.
that's what
when
we
you can
should
ride
be
a bicycle, you take your own cab, you know. And I do it too. I'm a hypocrite, but it's good to come.
No, but listen, the problem is not consumption. The problem is how we deal with the waste of that consumption and how we deal with the waste of the production. That's the biggest problem. And the thing is,
you're talking about treating the sickness. I'm talking about preventing the sickness. That's you can't. We got to stop producing the waste in the first place. You know, we can't.
How are you going to stop producing it?
Producing more responsibly.
What do you mean more responsibly?
You make plastic bottles. You tax the shit out of plastic bottles.
Okay, nobody's going to buy plastic bottles.
Exactly. There you go.
Sure. So what's going to happen?
So you get your own.
So the companies who produce plastic bottles will collapse. And when are those companies located? In the subdeveloped countries that have the industries going. Still, you ruin their economy.
Evian is not.
They don't have the funds, the money to change their production to, more expensive glass bottles.
That's not my problem. That's not my problem.
It is. No, that's not your problem. So you're thinking about yourself here, about your virtue signaling, instead of thinking about those people in the poorer countries. Is that your point? You want to feel good with yourself because you don't want to pollute the environment, but you don't care about the people who will lose their jobs.
No, you're connecting too many things. You're connecting too many things.
You need to connect them because a lot of things are connected.
You're underappreciating the urgency of the environment deteriorating at a ridiculous rate, and without this, we have nothing. Okay. Without this world, you have no economy, you have no politics, you have no poor country making money, nothing. They're going to be flooded, mate. It doesn't matter. It's not. The problem isn't whether they can produce or not, whether you're taking a job away or not. The problem is they're going to get flooded. They're going to get hit with hurricanes, tsunamis.
It has nothing to do with pollution.
Of course it does.
No, it doesn't.
Weather patterns and rising sea levels.
What do the hurricanes have to do with pollution?
Melting ice caps.
What do the hurricanes have to do with pollution? How? Explain.
Okay.
Come here, explain.
If we have an environmentalist, I'm sure that can explain, but
so you can't explain because you're not an environmentalist.
Yeah,
so why do you believe in it if you can't
explain? Because I've seen enough evidence to
How did you
support
see
it.
the evidence?
Watching documentaries.
Okay,
and
but explain to me what's the evidence. How does it function?
It's there, man. It's there. Like
has increased, and so have adverse.
So I'll tell you
wait,
what,
I
I'll tell you
throw
one
trash
sec-
in the
Oh,
ocean,
wait,
and there will be more hurricanes.
No. 1 second. No,
What sense does that
we're talking
make?
about pollution in general, not one act of.
So what? pollution?
97%. This is a real fact. 97% of environmentalists agree that climate change is real. That this is having an effect on weather patterns. 97%, not 50-50. Trump he's playing the game.
Nobody's saying climate change
Anyway.
is not real.
Some people.
Well, that's
Well, I'm not saying that.
So
What I'm saying
what are
is
you
throwing trash in the ocean won't make more hurricanes come up.
That's not. It's the carbon
It's the
release
cumulative
which,
thing. You
the
gotta see,
carbon
like,
release which increases the temperature of Earth, which increases the number of adverse weather events. Hurricanes are
100%.
Okay, that might be one
and
of
it
our
changes weather
disagreements.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
I hope
Because it
Piers
changes
Corbyn.
airflow.
Have you ever heard of Piers Corbyn?
Yes.
I don't really like Jeremy Corbyn, but Piers
Me
Corbyn
neither.
Jeremy Corbyn is a pretty reasonable guy. He came here a few times and he spoke about climate change. That is happening, but it's not happening mainly because of humans.
Yeah, he
it
doesn't
has
believe
been
in
happening
anthropogenic climate
for a long
change.
time now.
But we're helping. Like humans
But we're
are
not helping a lot.
The gas
It's a very
emissions,
small influence.
the way we
So
eat.
what-
No, it's not. The
the
way we
way-
eat.
The way we eat. What do you mean?
The way we eat has a profound way on.
The
because
way we eat. How?
The way we eat is maybe one of the biggest contributors to climate change.
Okay,
Because we
cows
eat too much
fart a
cow.
lot.
What?
Cows fart a lot, and the fart causes a lot of
Yeah.
pollution and a lot of green gas.
And also, it's not just that. It's like because we eat so many animals. I think in the world we kill about 100 billion animals a year. 100 billion animals a year. Those are 100
Trillions.
100 billion with
58
I
billion.
mean, if you're
land
counting,
animals
okay,
and
if you're counting
trillions of
ants,
fish.
So
then
let's
yeah,
say-
we probably kill a bit
Anyway,
more.
let's say okay, it's a big number.
You
We
know,
can
there's
agree.
more ants in one ant colony
We can
than the
agree
whole
that it's a
population
big
of
number.
humanity.
Let's not argue about the number, but it's a big number. It's probably like 10 times for every one human. There's 10 animals being killed. Now, forget the moral aspect, the animal, poor animal. Forget that aside. But just think about 10 animals living for every human being, producing waste, getting antibiotics. Like, for how many years is producing all this waste? Where's that going? That's all getting flooded into the ocean, man. Everything floods into the ocean. So the way we eat does have a profound effect on the environment. Hence why you have companies like Beyond Meat being valued at ridiculous valuations on the stock market. People are betting on this macro trend, you know? Whether it will crystallize as fast as it's overvalued, and that's a whole different matter, but this is where it's going to change. We have to look at what we're doing, and we do have, like, we have a lot of impact on the environment, and we have to start choosing different things, you know?
Okay, sure. So you want to change the way food is produced. That's what you want to change.
Yeah, and starting with consumption. If you substitute the real burger with a plant-based burger, that's it. The demand for cows will fall down. Business will go out of business.
You mean soy burger?
Yeah, like a plant-based burger. What's wrong with that?
Soy is not very healthy if consumed too much.
So it's not
So we consume animals like meat, dairy, cheese that are
Yes. Yes. We are omnivorous animals.
Yeah, fine, and it has a perfect link with cancer, heart attacks. It does. It's there. The evidence is there. What do you think? You know, like.
Soy is not very healthy.
All right, so we use pea protein. We can agree on pea protein. You know.
Yeah,
What? Sorry.
Pea protein.
Pea protein.
Yeah.
Okay.
How
do you produce that?
I don't know how you
Okay,
produce
so-
pea protein,
okay,
but
fine.
but you're not raising an animal. The energy ratio of a cow to get that cow to a level to harvest, we have to invest like 40 times the energy to get it. So grains. 75% of the grains we eat in the world are. 75% of the grains we produce are for animals to eat, to then kill, to then for us to eat. If that doesn't seem inefficient, man, and the transporting and the waste that it produces, we're doing things the wrong way. But the problem is there's a lot of money involved. That's where the problem is. There's, you know, you start.
That's one of the problems. Yeah.
You try and bring that industry down in the USA, and it's hard. You know, they have
But look, man, the
It's like
thing
a
is, it's
mafia,
not
man.
healthy for humans to not eat any meat, any cheese, any animal products.
I-
It's simply not healthy.
I don't agree.
Survive without eating.
I don't agree.
Well, they
but
can survive, but they can't live a healthy life.
Based on what? Sorry, based
They really can't.
Why?
Okay, for example.
Just
Based
stop
on what?
drinking Coca-Cola and Pepsi.
Yeah, exactly.
It wastes the same amount of water and
Thank you,
energy,
thank you.
and it's
That's a very good point.
super unhealthy for you.
That's a very good point.
Why
not do both?
It's a very, very good point. If you attack junk food like Coca-Cola, like Pepsi, you know, like those things that don't really matter to your health, they'll only make it worse, I couldn't argue against you. Fine. If you want to make a campaign saying don't eat junk food, don't drink this bad food, I'm with you. I'm with you. I mean, I'll probably still drink it a little bit, just a little though. But I might go with you. I might progressively lower the amount that I'm consuming, right? But you are going against the very consumption of meat. And that's something I can't defend.
No, hold on. Wait. No, I'm not going against. I'm just saying that's a very big cause of climate change, and it's within us to choose our whatever level of degree we're comfortable with. I'm very extreme. I don't expect people to be as extreme as that. People can just say instead of eating 7 times a week, I'm going to eat 4 times a week or 5 times a week, whatever. Even a small change will have an impact, and that's it. It's up to you, But just know what just know that our actions have consequences.
Oh yeah, of course.
And very
That's
easy
your
things
choice.
that are already changing that could change more is reusable straws or paper straws. All of that really helps with not polluting as much and like
Reusable or paper? Paper
like
straws. They
recyclable
actually, I think
And
I heard
there's
that
even
paper
plates
straws.
now that they're doing out of like banana peels and stuff, which is amazing. And it is.
What are they doing
actually,
of banana peels?
Banana peels. They're actually doing that in Colombia, where I'm from. Farmers making plates out of banana peels and out of fruits and things that could be trash but are really usable.
Okay.
Or like it does really help to change a couple of things. Like you can argue that one person may not change a lot, but it isn't one person we're talking about here. We're not talking about me or just him. We're talking about several people joining this cause. That will make a difference.
How did man
millions.
How did one man ever change the world? There are so many times in history when one person had a vision and they pushed it and they got what they wanted. Whether good or bad. But
The question isn't can one person
actually
make a
makes
difference?
jobs.
Your choices make a difference.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
choices that you make every day do make a difference.
Yeah, one man can change the world.
Already, there isn't a neutral situation here of eat meat and be neutral, or go like vegan and like be extreme and make eating meat is not a neutral choice. Eating meat, using plastic bottles, drinking soda, driving a car, taking a flight, buying a new pair of shoes, going for coffee, our choices make a difference. So the question of whether or not one person can make a difference is moot, because the choices we make every day absolutely make a difference.
I think that we need to consume stuff, but we need to be responsible with that.
Because you're
Like,
also
you cannot just stop. I mean, yes, it's going to affect the economy if you just stop buying the things that the companies and the people are producing. But for example, like the plates for planting back in Colombia or Ecuador, these are made by small farmers, like really small farmers, and the stools
creates
made
more
of wood
jobs,
and so on
actually.
in India. Like you should spend your money, like tons of money on that, and use it, and it's biodegradable and it's not affecting the environment.
Because you
But
argue
it's not about stopping the economy; it's about making smart choices.
Yeah, okay.
Example, of course, I like meat. I'm not gonna stop eating meat, but I know that it cannot be your main source of nutrition. And before, I will try to stop drinking sodas and eating junk food, because that is the one that's gonna affect your health and the economy.
But
Everything
also,
affects your health as well.
yes. Because also you were saying that it makes less jobs and it ruins the economy. But for example, the paper plates and the plates out of the banana peels make more jobs actually. So there would not be a problem.
Okay, you're right.
It's
but
just that the big companies don't
you're
want to
missing
make
one
the
very important
investment
point.
on
One
changing
very
their
important
ways.
point. It's the world of economics. Now, I'm not that well versed in the world of economics. I have an economist friend, so I sometimes ask him some things about it, and he taught me some things. But I can't call myself like very well-versed person. One thing that I do know, however, is that in the world of economics, they will do that which is the most functional for their profit. Which means, it's fine to make the plates, biodegradable plates and all that stuff, but it will inevitably be more expensive to make them and more
Not
costly.
necessarily.
Yeah, not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Okay, wait.
I
Because
disagree.
If it were
it's
not,
out of
wait.
things that they
This
don't
is
even
a
have to buy. It's
self-dissolving
banana
argument.
peels.
You're making a self-dissolving argument. If it were cheaper to make the plates out of the biodegradable stuff, then they would inevitably do that because they are trying to do which is cheapest, the
only
best, the
reason
most
what's
profitable
not
for them.
cheaper right now is because these big companies already have all the infrastructure to make it and they don't want to change.
I disagree.
If they change,
I have
it will
solution
be
for
even
that.
cheaper, but they just don't want to change. They don't want to go to
Okay,
that
so two
work.
things. One thing, the reason why the plastic plate is cheaper is because the externality cost of that plate is not being factored into the price. Number one. So the real cost of that plastic plate going into a landfill, blah blah blah, it probably has another 4 or 5 cents attached to that plate that is not being paid by the consumer. In the end, it goes out of taxpayers' money when we go to landfill. Number one. Number two, the price doesn't even have to be that low. If people accept that the biodegradable option is better, and we demand it more, then those businesses will thrive and the other ones won't. They'll run out of business, or the business will go down.
Or they will change.
So you can change it from two ways. One, from the consumption side, demanding one by one our choices, or two, the government actually puts an externality and attaches a tax to it. In the UK, you can do both. You could do both exactly. And those two forces can act really well together in the same way that cigarettes have externalities, right? Because everyone that smokes, or the more you smoke, the more likely you are to use NHS and have problems, right? So it's only fair that whoever smokes has to pay that externality. The same thing should apply to things like plastics and uses, and we're starting to see that with the 5p, and it's not enough. It's going to hurt,
So which one would be better? The individual?
I think the externality could be quite effective straight away.
So should the government impose on us day by day, or should we, as an individual, when we choose,
right?
To sacrifice that comfort, I think then we can. Otherwise, I think with the big companies lobbying government, we will go on and we will talk about it every day and every generation. But unless the individual takes its personal responsibility, nothing will change.
I agree. That's in your own hands. That's in our hands, and it doesn't depend on the government doing or not doing, or potentially that policy changing 4 years down the line when somebody else comes along and undoes or changes what was agreed. So you're right. I think it's the one we can count on for sure to have an impact is ourselves. Yeah.
The most important thing when we are responsible for our own things, whatever we do, every moment, every second. I think you should be responsible for that. If you take responsibility away, do whatever you like.
Agreed.
Who cares?
You can take all the responsibility in the world, but if you don't know how things actually function, you might make things worse. Look, what you're saying is, you got a point in what you're saying. It would be better for the environment if we change those things. But my point is, first of all, it's very difficult to actually implement it. It might sound easy that, we just protest, we just make the government change, we just make a change, every one of us will stand for change. But if they simply refuse to do it, you can't do anything. It's as simple as that. You can't force them. You have no power to force anyone. All you can do is not buy it for a while. And the big companies, they will still buy the cheapest stuff because it gives them more profit. They are the ones who are calling the shots.
The company makes it because we buy it. So if we stop buying it, the company will not make it.
I was going to say, there's a huge market.
But you don't have a power over all the people
growing and
around
growing.
you.
There's so many young people today that don't want to have slavery involved in their production or pollution. And I think it was the Financial Times that said it's like £81 billion worth, this market in Britain, this ethical market. It's mostly driven by young people who want to have a change.
Kyle, you come from the supposition that we know exactly which products involve slave labor. We don't. Not all of the products. In some products, it's really difficult to find out. For example, products that are made in China. How the hell are you gonna check if it's done by slaves? China is close to the outside world. The outside world doesn't have an influence in China. India is not very different. They can just do whatever they want in that country, and you can't do shit about it. The only way for you to make that change is for you to take power over those countries. And I don't think any of you would like to argue for that. For the West to just grab power from those countries and say, okay, you guys, you do this, and that's it, end of story. We got weapons pointed at you, just do that. Because that's the only way to do what you want to do. Because simply, they won't do it.
It's going to be very, very difficult. And there are several examples and cases of small towns. At least I know about 3, I think, back in South America, that the people decided that they were going to ban plastic. And it's not a governmental thing, and these are like very poor people, like towns and stuff. And they are only using baskets and things that are not made of plastic. There's zero plastic in this town.
Yeah, small towns.
So it is. Yeah, but my point is that you're saying that it will cost a lot of money to do that. And these are people that don't have the resources to spend a lot of money to do that. And if they could do it as a society, as a small group, I'm not talking about 12 people.
Those small towns don't function the same way as all the world. In those small towns, they might function their own way. Like, I can go to my home and I can say, okay, I'm not going to consume any plastic from now on. I'm going to go to the forest, build my hut, and live like that.
I'm not talking about jungle or people that are
that's because that's the only way. That's the only way you will not consume any of the things offered to you by society. That is the only way.
Houses, we're not talking about communities.
Girls, the only way for you to not consume anything that is bad for the environment, let's say, is for you to seclude yourself from the society that is built on those things that produce the things that you consume.
States in North America that have. How about entire states in United States that have banned plastic water bottles? States.
So what?
So
it's
they
one
cannot
small
do it?
thing.
It's
listen.
One small thing.
Yeah, I'm not talking about a house.
Okay. I'll tell you guys.
Small anymore.
Okay. Let me.
Pavlov, can I interject for a second? Go ahead. There is a second dimension to this that you guys aren't discussing. It's number one, the consumption is one dimension of it, but there's an entire supply chain behind that consumption. So being responsible isn't simply deciding what to buy, but there are going to be cases where you are deciding to quit your job because you are facilitating, you are part of the structure. So that is a dimension to it. And the second dimension is that, yes, just because we decide to, say, in your example, replace plastics with, say, paper, or instead of using plastic bags, we're going to use wicker baskets, suddenly the demand is going to change from using plastic to a wicker basket, and we've created another problem because where is all the raw material for these wicker baskets going to come from? And we're back where we started again. So the real solution isn't simply in choosing what we buy, but an entire lifestyle change where this idea of consumption becomes a historical throwback and we live in a slightly different way. Now, if I'm going to be honest, I see it in some ways as a downgrade. Some people will see it as a kind of, no, why? Why do I have to actually, carry stuff and like if there's no meat because the animals all died in winter, I can't get my meat anymore, and I have to farm seasonally now, and that's like these changes are not going to be, acceptable by everyone, even though they are potentially very healthy for the planet. So we're talking about. So yes, I agree with you. It's a start and it will make a difference, but is it enough? Is the real question. Yeah. So sorry for interrupting.
No, it's cool. I like your interruptions. Either way, I wanted to tell you girls a story. This is a funny one. You'll like it. A friend of mine told me he works in a paper factory, so he knows about these things. The filters for the coffee. When they brew the coffee, they have paper filters to brew it, right? On one occasion, people wanted to remove the coloring of those filters because they're being colored white like paper. They're bleached, yeah, and it uses up energy, right? It uses up energy. So they wanted to ban it because it uses energy unnecessarily. So they started making the natural color. I think it's brown, like the natural color of paper, and it tasted like shit. The coffee tasted worse. People didn't like the coffee. The people who were selling the coffee lost a lot of money on that. So look what they did. They would color the things. They would put a color which was the same color as the original one, which means the filters, it wouldn't be noticeable that they're being colored because they were the same color as the original color, but they would be colored because the taste is influenced by the lack of coloring. Do you know what I mean? They would still color them, but they would color them in brown. So people would think it's environmentally friendly, but in reality, it wasn't environmentally friendly, because if it were environmentally friendly, the coffee would taste bad. And that's the difficult situation of being environmentally friendly, because, you know, I'd like to be environmentally friendly, but the problem is, I notice things that don't really make a lot of sense, like people, in the Extinction Rebellion, for example. For me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. A movement made by a, 11-year-old girl?
No.
Well, how old is she?
No, it wasn't made by her.
It wasn't made by her, but it was started by her.
Okay, so you're changing what you said. The science exists.
Semantics.
And she simply read it as an 11-year-old and decided that it's so important she wants to do something about it. That's all.
Okay, but the movement didn't exist before her, so she made the movement.
Yes, but the science did. That's the point.
It was started by Roger Hallam, who's an academic in Cambridge, I believe, doing a PhD in...
Why is Greta the spokesperson then?
We could quote thousands of scientists. I mean, climate change has come about, the science, through generations of scientists coming together and then discovering that they're actually talking about the same thing from all different fields of science. That's its strength.
Yeah.
And you can deny all you like, but...
we'll deny it.
Yeah.
Because it reminds me a lot of something that people that we call in history the children's crusade.
This is a scientific
I'm not changing
discussion.
the subject.
You are. You're changing the subject because you know full well this is a scientific subject. The papers are published. The scientists are out there. If you have a counter scientific argument which shows that they're wrong, then enter the debate, publish a paper, have different experts look at it without knowing who you are.
There are scientists who are skeptical about climate
like
change.
Piers Corbyn, for example, but I assume you don't like him a lot.
Yes, I have not. I have not made the claim that 100% of scientists support climate change.
No. I'm saying it's not as easy as you're making it out to be. As if
I can't hear you.
You're making it out as if anyone can write a paper and just publish.
Yeah,
you can't. You have to belong to certain
Have you heard of the
organizations.
Well, sir, you'll find that you can submit papers in different ways. Have you checked that out?
No, because you can't. You can't.
I disagree with you.
You can't publish any scientific papers into any respected organizations or.
Well, you can at least try. You can at least try.
No, it's not a matter of trying. It's not a matter of trying.
So have you tried?
You can try as much as you like, but it won't be accepted.
So have you tried?
Because the scientific community has a certain perspective on the subject.
No.
That doesn't mean they're wrong. That doesn't mean they're wrong.
That doesn't
mean they're wrong.
What you're doing is you're alleging that those who support and put the case for climate change...
No, I'm not alleging anything.
Okay, let me finish my point. Let me finish my point. Okay, if I'm wrong, you can correct me. What I'm hearing you saying is you're alleging that scientists have a bias. What I'm going to say to you is that science... they have a bias in favor of science. Science works in a particular way. Now, it is true that it will be difficult to get into that culture or get your papers published if you just simply disregard the way that science works.
No, it's not a matter of disregarding. It's a matter of belonging to certain organizations, and if you don't...
No, you're just alleging bias. Next you're going to say they're all corrupt, they're all in it for the money.
No, I'm not saying that at all.
We don't need experts.
I believe in
We don't need experts anymore.
No, man, listen, there's a scientific fact, is that climate has been changing since the Middle Ages, and it has been warming up.
But the question is, what's the cause?
What do you mean that man is the cause in the Middle Ages?
We can agree with that. Well, in the Middle Ages, we did not have the kind of intensive industries pumping out carbon left, right, and centre.
So why did it start changing?
Sorry?
So why did the climate start changing at that time, and not just now?
No, you weren't listening. We did not have the kind of intensive industries, intensive capitalism. Well, it's an obvious fact. I just need to say it. It's only around the 18th century when we start producing and wasting and throwing stuff away, and we now live in a completely throwaway culture.
Yeah, fair enough.
In a way that centuries before they would look at us. What are you throwing that away? In a way which the majority of people who live in undeveloped economies think is crazy. You're throwing away good stuff which we could recycle. But it's now every day we do it and we don't think about it. We need to start thinking about it.
Okay, yeah.
You need to get in touch with your rubbish.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. That's what I was telling to the girls who were here a while ago. I was telling them that the two things necessary to change the environment is to manage the way we produce and to manage the way we deal with the trash. Those are the main things. The amount of consumption, it's almost irrelevant compared to those two things. It's almost irrelevant. Like, people will still consume. You have to force them to stop consuming. You have to indoctrinate them to stop consuming if you want them to stop consuming, because it's natural. People want a better life. Sorry? Well, that kind of education is what I call indoctrination. You tell a person...
Right, but education takes time. Okay, we've got a crisis between now...
we could reach a tipping point, I understand it.
2050 is a kind of a crisis point, possibly a tipping point. So, for instance, do we need to fly so many times? It's a huge release of carbon.
Yeah, except that...
I've stopped flying.
Except that Greta flew from many different locations to each other, just to speak a little bit about it. And many celebrities also who defend climate change, they fly from place to place to
but
place
notice
to place.
What you're doing. You're criticizing celebrities for hypocrisy, and you say, oh, because they're doing it, I'll do it. If it's wrong for them...
No, man, I'm saying they are the spokespeople of their ideology. If they're not practicing, why should we practice it?
To do what they want, then it's wrong for everybody.
They're the faces of their ideology. Okay. If they're not doing it, why should we do it? If they're
ideology, it's not ideology.
So if one celebrity flies to do say they make an advert saying, okay, everyone needs to stop flying, and it gets 5 people to not do flights, there will ultimately be 4 flights they've cancelled out. There will be, we still live in a society where we use resources for the time being, and just, if you criticise, it's like, oh, I went to an Extinction Rebellion meeting the other day and they had electric lights on, and they were using biros, which needs to be thrown away, and it's like, it would be great if
as far as I know, electric lights are considered not very...
but climate extinction is not an argument against stopping consumption.
Yeah.
It's about saying, be conscious of your consumption and can you avoid so much of it, okay? And that will remove the need for governments perhaps to come in the future, and even though we may have kids educated to it, there's still a gap that we need to make, and so laws will have to come in.
So let me throw in a concept here for you guys. Sorry for interrupting. Do you know the story of the guy who tried to build a toaster using only local materials?
Yeah.
How much did the toaster cost him? Something like £10,000 to make a toaster.
Yeah. He had to learn how to smelt metal, and it was a pretty janky toaster in the end of it. Yeah.
Exactly. So a toaster is far from the most technologically sophisticated thing out there, and look at how much it costs to manufacture it locally. It's cheaper to have it manufactured in a large factory in China and then fly it over in bulk or ship it in a container, both very environmentally destructive processes, to get them over to the UK and selling them.
That's according to the economics today.
Yes.
Those economics might change.
Exactly.
They might be subject to the same very fast change that the climate appears to be in.
And
so things that were cheap may become expensive.
And to make it more interesting for you, it also requires having to ship industry from abroad back home, which will solve a lot of the economic and austerity problems that we're already facing. So we're going to be less competitive, but at the same time, you've saved the environment and you've brought jobs in. So we've literally hit two birds with one stone.
But you'd have to include the cost of transplanting the industry from one country to another.
It's never going to be cheap. Never going to be cheap.
But one of my things is if companies needed to face more ethical and environmental regulations, it would necessarily push the price of things up as well. So it would change the supply and demand of certain things.
I agree with you.
So, for example,
what is President Trump doing?
Beef is a major
removing those regulations.
Yeah, beef is a major cause of methane emissions and climate change. I don't think it would be right for the government to force everyone to be a vegan, but if they said, okay, but if you're going to have a cow, you've got to make sure it is treated well, or a chicken. You know, none of these giant warehouses where a chicken has about this much room for itself and it's kept in the dark for some reason. And if they got rid of that, then chicken would be a lot more expensive.
But who's the they? Who's the they? You said they. If they got rid of that, who's the they?
So if the government said that's not allowed to happen anymore, like if you go to have chickens,
but that would be the end of that government, wouldn't it? Because we still eat meat.
But the price of chicken will go up, and rather than chicken being something which loads of people have every day, you might have one chicken a week, and that would decrease the demand of that.
A lot of people are having less than one chicken a week, I can tell you.
I'm frankly wary of that, because down that road you're talking about authoritarian government state intervention. I would far rather that people look, we live in an educated, the developed world, we're educated people. We need to look at the evidence and take heed of the evidence. And I think an awful lot could be changed by simple, accumulated small changes across people's lives, which we haven't tried yet.
Companies have always their modus operandi is increasing shareholder value. So, and I always believe it's the government's idea the government's point is to step in those times when a company's individualistic aim of increasing shareholder value will impinge on the rights of others.
I'm not going to disagree with you, but that's true as a generalization. But it is also true that there's a growing movement within shareholders to militate for boards to bring in more environment-friendly investment decisions and measure that. I mean, you can now go to companies and you can look at their annual report and they will do an environmental audit. It's called the triple bottom line. So they're not only looking for profit, they're looking for gender representation, they're looking at environmental this, that and the other. And there are some companies that have five, they measure themselves by 5 targets. Okay? And they get outside people. This isn't, this isn't greenwash. They get people from outside the company to go and measure the company. Okay, so we need to take account of that. Business isn't always the problem.
What do you mean by gender representation?
You're looking at the balance of the workforce.
Okay.
Especially at the senior level too.
Okay, you want to force them to include more women?
No, it's not about force. It's about recognizing that in some industries there's a very overwhelming male. Right now, if you look at physics, for instance, up until maybe 10 years ago, overwhelmingly most physicists were men. Now that's changing. Guess what? We've discovered there's a good chunk of women coming out with physics degrees who can do physics.
Okay, fair enough. But look, don't you think that the best people will automatically rise to the top in terms of physics? Do you think there's an inherent bias?
No, if you have a biased employment recruitment process.
Where is it biased?
In the way that
it's illegal not to hire someone because of their gender here.
Sorry?
It's illegal not to hire somebody because of their gender.
But you can set recruitment targets. Okay.
What do you mean set? Like have a government quota? Is that what you're saying?
No, the companies do this by themselves.
Oh, so you don't mean like government intervention or?
No.
So wait, do you think that companies aren't hiring women because they're misogynistic?
No, I think these companies haven't recruited as many women as they might have because of various biases that have come in and existed.
Misogyny?
Well, yes, misogyny, if you like. But they don't hate women, they just don't value them perhaps as high as men.
Because they're women. It's purely because they're women.
Well, people who have looked
because
at
I can tell you
no, we don't need any anecdotes. People who have we don't need any anecdotes. People who have looked at this have tried to find a reason to explain it. They haven't found one. So
it must be misogyny then. If you haven't
maybe there isn't a reason because it's not something that actually.
Well, the magic thing is that once you start sort of fairly treating women in interview, you don't start excluding them if, for instance, they're married and they have one child. Oh, they might have a second child. Oh, that means they won't be in. We don't want. Once you start taking a positive view of women having children and families and all the rest, then magically it seems to. It seems to happen.
Yeah, children are very important, yes. We have to do something.
Well, I mean, I would have thought they're crucial. if you want to have any ideas of the future, you've got to have children.
Stop having them. When you're running a business, you don't care about somebody's gender, if they have a penis or a vagina. You just want the best person to job out.
You see, that's also true because...
by the way, there's some people who don't have either and have both.
Or either, whatever.
And that's another discussion.
Or even if they're an alien, you wouldn't really care.
Well, they do. a lot of companies want to reflect the society they operate in. Okay? Because guess what? There's social media now. You can, as an employee, you can go on and say, "This is a shithole to work for. Don't join." Okay? So companies are aware that good people can be put off even applying if employees go online anonymously and say it's a terrible place. Don't bother coming. They work you like a slave or whatever.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful because now you can just pay anybody a very, very low wage and just give them the freedom to be transsexual.
No,
it's just wonderful.
There's a minimum wage. There's a minimum wage.
Well, this progressive movement has.
Sorry, you need to update yourself, sir.
No, I'm sure.
The minimum wage was brought in by the last Labour government. The Tories,
you can give them very low wage, but you can give them
No, you can't pay anyone a very low wage. There's a minimum wage, okay? And there's a living wage. Okay, there's the London living wage, which the next Labour government will bring in. Okay, and of course we'll hear the same arguments. Oh, it's going to cause unemployment, etc., etc., etc. But then in 5 years' time, it'll be accepted. Like the minimum wage was accepted, and industry did not create a fuss.
Okay, let's not bring this to Tories to Labour. Let's stay on topic.
What? You're not a political person.
I am, but not in terms of Tories slash.
No, I agree with gender equality. I think we should treat everyone just equally as terrible as
well, there you are.
Either way, let's come back to what we were talking about a while ago. We are kind of coming back to the problem that if you decrease consumption in the West, the countries that are producing that consumption will suffer with it. Just like it happened with the US after Europe recovered from World War II and they weren't consuming as much stuff from the US as much products. And the American economy collapsed because they couldn't.
Sorry, when did the American economy collapse? After the war?
Well, yeah.
No, after the Second World War, the American economy had no competition. The American economy boomed.
Yes.
The American economy boomed. It became the number one by far. Gas, as they used to say in the songs, was 25 cents a gallon.
Yes.
The American economy boomed, my friend. It did not go into depression.
I know. Hear me out. I'm telling you the whole story. World War II, Europe is fucked. Europe can't produce. Europe gets destroyed from World War II. America is not destroyed. America takes over the economy in the whole world because America is almost untouched by the World War II. America basically takes over the whole economy. After that, Europe eventually recovers from their losses. They start producing
by American investment called the Marshall Plan, which resuscitated the economy of Germany and France, and the Marshall Plan was offered to Russia.
Okay, but
for ideological reasons,
they
the Russians
refused,
turned it down.
because they're fucking
Well,
Soviets.
they didn't need to. The Americans very carefully crafted speeches where they recognized the supreme sacrifice of the Russians. I know you're anti-Russian, but this is history.
No, I'm anti-Soviet Union.
Okay. And,
I don't know why you call
the
Russia
Russians,
the Soviet Union.
Stalin was intent on creating
it's not Russia, it's the Soviet Union.
the Cold War, which he did. So he refused the money. He cut his nose off and the Russians, the Russian people suffered for it.
The Soviet people.
And most of the collapses in the U.S. economy weren't related to industry; they were related to finance. Per se,
overproduction.
Not even production. So if you look at say the Great Depression in the 1930s, all of the recessions in the 80s, even the 2008 recession, it was about a shift from a production and industrialization economy to a finance-based economy. And the problem with finance is it's not a wealth-generating industry. It moves money around. It tries to create wealth out of nothing, and they're generally bubbles.
There was a recession in the 70s, and that was caused directly by OPEC intervening. Basically saying, you will buy our oil, we control it at our price. And that was a big shock for America. Okay, but from the end of the war until the 1970s, the American economy was number one. It expanded, it had no competition.
Okay, Mustafa, look, I think I might disagree a little bit about that. I think the main, as far as I know at least, maybe I'm wrong, but as far as I know, the main reason for the collapse for the Great Collapse, was that the shares lost the value they had.
Which Great Collapse? Which period?
The Great Depression.
Great Depression.
Depression. We're back to the 20s.
Right. I call it collapse because in Portugal we call it crack de bolsa. I associated the word to collapse.
It's the same meaning, but you can always trace them. So again, the factories in the United States closed down. It's not like there was overproduction or people buying too much.
They burned production. They destroyed production because there was too much.
Because there was
no buyers.
Because there was no one to buy.
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about.
There was widespread stock speculation.
Yeah.
Everyone thought they could invest their money in the stock market and they'd never lose. Why? Because they'd been encouraged to buy war bonds during the First World War, and they had guaranteed interest. It was guaranteed by the government, and it was just a money-making enterprise.
Well, exactly.
So JP Morgan spots that, and he basically says, "We'll start knocking out shares." And he had a whole insider dealing, share dealing, which included the governor of New York, all of the elites on the East Coast. They got in and got out, and then the suckers got left behind.
Very similar
and that's what caused the crash.
And very similar in 2008 with real estate is that people were buying junk debt, effectively buying up houses like there was a bubble, and then suddenly when the banks get called to actually pay the debt, all we do is we own debt. There was nothing.
People were encouraged to buy all kinds of very dodgy financial products. Which had no value at all. When the game stopped, they were stuck with
no insurance,
paper.
no job loans.
Yeah.
What kind of loaning?
True. But look, guys, that's exactly my point. And why did that all happen? Because the production was too much and there wasn't enough consumption for the production.
Wall Street speculation. It was to do with a very small group of people who basically decided we are going to play poker with other people's money.
Guys, you're right.
And when we lose,
I'm not disagreeing
we
with
don't
you.
lose. A few of us may go to prison. Most of us will get away. That's what happened in 1929, and that's what happened in 2000.
Okay, I think there's a misunderstanding going on here. I'm agreeing with you. I know what you're talking about, but I'm focusing mostly. Wait, calm down. The thing I'm focusing on is the origin of the whole deal. Is the very first step for the whole crash, crash of the of the whole system. And the problem for that is, some people were producing a lot when the consumers were consuming less. And that's the very first step, the very origin of it. If that didn't happen, then the investment in the stocks would give them back the money. It would still have the money because they would still sell the stuff.
The history of the Wall Street crash has been poured over by probably thousands of different books. I would suggest you go and read a little bit more. Go and read.
Okay, you can say that, but prove why am I wrong?
Well,
I'll tell you.
I'm unable to do this right now. Look at the amount of sheer speculation, of ordinary people with hardly two cents to rub together. They were putting aside $1-2 a month so they could buy shares because it was guaranteed money.
Yep.
And there was something else that arose in the 1920s and the 1930s. So this idea of overproduction was something that was on the top of the mind of most business people. That they are afraid to produce too much that doesn't get consumed. In the 1930s, that's when the art of public relations started, and it was a guy named Edward Bernays who actually. So this idea of we're overproducing was already something that people were already conscious and thinking about and coming up with different ways to mitigate that. Now, if it was we've overproduced, how do we fix it? That story never came up.
You reduce your price and you knock them out. I mean,
pretty much.
Any retailer, we've got too much shit, knock it out, 20% off, sale.
Yeah.
The other thing which happened in 1929 was banks would loan people money in order to buy shares. So when the whole thing collapsed, people not only had paper, nothing, they were in debt to the banks.
It's like 2008. Exactly the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
What you see, once the discussion gets technical, everybody goes away.
I was going to say,
unregulated banks, and we still haven't properly regulated the banks. They've been told they have to keep more money on their books. They've been told they need to compensate people to a higher level, but the same system is still in place. There's people sitting, looking at computer screens, gambling effectively in a casino economy with other people's money, other people's pension funds, and that's just out the fund. So that's what will create. The seeds are already there for the next.
I mean, banks are still collapsing. Just a few years ago, a Portuguese bank called Banco Espírito Santo simply collapsed. Lots of people lost their money. Simple as that. It was like, fuck. There goes my money. Bye.
Well, Lehman Brothers.
It was pretty scary. It was pretty scary.
Can you count me in?
Sure, of
count
course.
Me in. I'll be the lookout.
I always thought you were a bank robber. I always thought you were a bank robber.
But okay, look, guys. I really agree with you on what you're saying. But the whole deal, yes, indeed, it has a lot to do with the investment. Yes, that's a very fulcral part. That's a very important part. But I still think that the origin of the whole deal is that there's production and there's not enough consuming of that production, which means that all the investment is for nothing. And that one problem is the thing that originated all the other problems. Because if that one thing didn't happen, all the other things wouldn't happen.
Obviously, supply and demand comes into this, but there's a simple remedy to supply and demand. Anyone who overproduces will then try and sell the product by dropping the price, okay, to bring it into balance. I mean, the idea that there are people who are intentionally or unintentionally wasting their capital by overproducing, then allowing the goods to rot. I mean, no, come on.
So it only
No, but that's
happened
not
in
what I'm
an
saying.
instance where the company Atari overproduced a number of
the gaming company.
cartridges. Yeah, Atari.
Oh, I know,
Yeah,
ET cartridges, and then they kept them in a...
And they basically dumped
they
them
didn't
all
sell
in a
them
landfill.
because the game was so
the
shit.
game was
to keep the price, to keep the market price up. Well, that's another thing that business owners will do. They will take the goods off the market and
dump it
Well, if you look at an organisation,
It's exactly
like
what
De Beers
happened in the
with
crash.
diamonds,
They destroyed the production.
They regulate the market.
Well, they
amount
do.
of diamonds that go out.
But that's another scam because our Russian friends, the Russians have the biggest supply.
Russian friends where?
Ukraine.
Well, I don't see any Russian friends.
The whole idea that South Africa has the world supply of it's untrue. Russia has more diamonds. Okay, it's just the Beers have branded it and advertised it and all the rest. When you walk into the diamond center, and of course the Russians never had proper access. I'm not suggesting they should have. At any point into our markets, they were, because they were communists, and the ruble was the value of the ruble was fixed by us. You want to trade your rubles? Okay, I'll give you, a really low price because they can't go anywhere else. That was always the flaw in the Russian system. The
Soviet
foreign
system.
currency rate was fixed by the West, and it was always fixed by the West. So they were always, desperate for foreign currency, but they never got enough.
No, man, the problem in the Soviet system was that it was a closed system. They had no ability to compete. They completely closed themselves. They didn't really develop themselves that well. And the main problem is that they didn't encourage people to compete and produce better things. They forced people to produce. They forced people to produce. They forced people to produce. They removed everything but the They forced. Okay. This guy is impossible.
Come on,
they forced people to produce. They removed everything but the bare minimum for them to survive, and that is no way to encourage people to produce better and produce more. Which means they couldn't compete ever with the West. Which means they had to close themselves because the system was dysfunctional.
And again, the Soviet government also set these ridiculous quotas on the factory.
Exactly.
So they'd end up producing a chandelier that weighed
Exactly.
like
Then they
100
lied
kilograms.
about it. They had to lie because you go to the gulag if you don't produce enough.
Exactly.
It was a completely rotten system.
But that doesn't mean that there wasn't innovation. So
There was.
So in computer science, what I study, a lot of the algorithms that we study came out of Russian scientists in the Soviet
Very
Union.
good science institutes.
It's mainly because of the Cold War. It bred a lot of the Cold War itself bred a lot of innovation
They
from
genuinely
both sides.
believed in science. They put aside religion and all the rest, and they created some great science.
Yeah, they put aside
which is still
religion
there.
for the cult of personality, which is basically the same thing.
Yeah. No, give them credit where credit's due. But I mean, it was a police state. If you didn't agree with it politically, you were off to Siberia.
Nice.
It was a nasty.
Having some
murderous
vodka with the
regime.
bears.
Yeah. How many squirrels have you massacred? Look, there's at least 2.
4 for this small thing. What a waste,
that
man.
one's mourning.
Did you only use their
That
tails?
one's a fresh one. That one's from last year.
Gotcha.
Anyway. Right, good. Yeah.
So there's Steve up.
Come take over everything from your humanity.
Come, man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
You do? So, isn't it odd that God would use such a cruel method of getting to humans? I find that...
Only if you posit that his intention was to get to the current state of the universe using some naturalistic mechanism that we now know to be evolution, for example. Evolution is sufficient but not necessary as an explanation.
Right, but